Premed Office Hours, episode 100, 202. I was going to say 102, but that's not right. 202. I hope you are all doing fantastic. It's fun. One of my screens says we're live and the other one says we are not. So I don't know what's going on. You guys show we're live?
Yeah.
All right, we'll make it work. I hope you're having a wonderful day. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, founder of Medical School HQ and Mapped, author of some books, host of some podcasts, all around cool guy, I think. But what makes me even cooler is I get to hang out with these awesome folks. Dr. Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern, retired executive director at TMDSAS, and should I now say, recently bequeathed upon him, Reverend Dr. James Scott Wright.
Hello. Doing well. Just, helping all these wonderful pre-meds do the thing. And so it's always fun.
Doing the thing. Awesome. Yeah, and that thing right now is freaking out because it's application season. And that's just that's what we do. We are part of the, I don't know do I have my image here? Yeah, part of the OPC, the Overthinking Pre-Med Club is where we're at. So don't be a member of that club, or be a member and own it. We also have Dina Golini, former senior admissions officer for Brown School of Medicine and former assistant director of advising at Brown Warren Alpert's Medical School.
You got that reversed. You forgot you forgot Stanford.
No, I said Stanford.
You said Brown.
No, you said Brown.
You said Brown twice.
Close enough. Some will say Stanford is the Brown of the West Coast.
I think there's a big difference, personally. But hi. Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, share some wisdom today. Let me repeat that. Former senior admissions officer for Stanford School of Medicine.
Yeah.
Have to be correct.
Again, have to be correct. Hello, everyone. All right. Our job here is to answer your questions. Think of this as free pre-med advising for the hour. If you're potentially looking at getting some one-on-one help with your applications, that's what we do day in and day out. You can go over to medicalschoolhq.net and check out our admissions, advising, all that good stuff, services. Use the promo code PMOH as well. All right. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them. I'm going to lead off with the first question. Reverend Dr. James Scott Wright. TMDSAS is its own beast. You're retired executive director of TMDSAS. One of the big questions that comes in is with the shortened, although now lengthened, activity descriptions, a lot of the advice that we give for anecdotes with room for reflection and context and all of that makes it really hard for students. What's your advice for students to show as much impact as possible on TMDSAS?
Yeah, well, I think it depends a little bit on which category the activity fits in. If it's still a 300 character activity, then you really can't do much but just describe the activity. That's about all you can do. With the longer ones, where they have 500 characters, then you have the ability to expand upon that a little bit and talk about, maybe throw in a very shortened little anecdote, story, certainly a lot more reflection than you can in the 300 characters. And if it's a research thing, or if it's, one of where you get an extra sort of little box to go further into it, then you can go deeper into the research that you were doing, for example, or a story. So I think it kind of requires you to be a little bit discerning on what you want to say and what you have room to say, and then be able to weave in the best way possible some reflection. So that's what you have to do.
Nice. And then TMDSAS does allow for most meaningful activities. You get 3 most meaningful, similar to AMCAS, although only 500 or 600 characters.
500 characters, yeah.
For the most meaningful. And then there's also the non-traditional essay. That's part of TMDSAS. So there are lots of other little mini things here and there.
Places to put stuff, yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Dina, what do you think makes for a good activity description?
Not sounding like a resume. I think that when you write an activity description and it sounds like you just plucked it from a resume, it doesn't really sound that meaningful. It sounds a little like more robotic. I think there has to be a delicate balance of describing what you did so that the reader understands what this experience is, right? Like you can't assume that they know what, like, you know, I don't know, a particular experience is. You need to explain that, but you also need to reflect on it. And, you know, in the concept of, I mean, in the frame of like why it meant a lot to you and how it's going to impact you in medicine. But I think the ones that really are like, meh, are like the ones that sound like they're from a resume. Mm-hmm. The research ones really, I find, can get a little too scientific, where a lot of students write them as if like they just took it from a scientific paper. And you just always want to make sure that always think about, if somebody reading this doesn't have a science background, do they understand what I'm writing about? Because like for me, for example, reading applications, I didn't have a science background.
Yeah.
So if you're getting too technical with scientific terms, it's like, you know, you want to make sure that it can be digested.
Yeah. Save that for your research essay if you're applying MD, PhD, because then the graduate medical faculty are reading those ones. Yeah. They can nerd out with all your things. Suleiman, what do you mean by story and narrative? Could my narrative be overcoming fear and anxiety? I'm the type of person who would be too nervous to open acceptance or rejection letters until it's too late. So Scott, when you're talking about narrative and story, what do you mean by that? And then I have a follow-up question based on a kind of a conversation I had earlier with someone.
Well, so, you know, the narrative of the application is any text that you're typing in. So the description of an activity is a narrative. The most meaningful essay is a narrative. Obviously, the personal statement is a narrative. And when we talk about narrative, what we're really talking about is what are you saying? What is the essence of what you're saying? And so, to your question, Suleiman, could my narrative be overcoming fear and anxiety? I mean, if that is in a activity description, then yes, it could definitely be overcoming fear and anxiety. If that's something that you've dealt with and that you have a activity that addresses that, you know, you feel like, you know, speaks to that issue of you overcoming hardship in that way, then absolutely, I would say that's not an appropriate narrative for the personal statement, but for an activity description, I would see that as definitely something that you could have as the thrust of the narrative.
So they asked a follow-up question here. Could my activities be extreme sports to show I'm trying to overcome anxiety?
I mean, I suppose it could be. It depends a little bit on what you mean by extreme sports. I mean, it could be showing your lack of judgment. So
I jumped off a bridge with no parachute.
So I'm a little, I don't know what, you know, extreme sports means to you. So, you know, for extreme sports to me is, you know, even stepping foot onto a basketball court. That's extreme sports to me. You know,
Dina, what do you think about this question?
Well, the question confuses me. Could all your activities be extreme sports, or could one activity be
could one activity
sport?
Yeah,
I mean, I think if one entry is hobbies and it's extreme sports, but is the whole point of you writing it to say that you're trying to overcome anxiety? I don't know.
Yeah. It's one of those for me where I understand the goal of it, and I like that it's not trying to show, look, I'm doing extreme sports to prepare myself for medical school, right? It's just showing personal growth. So I like it from that angle, and not a sales pitch to like, oh, look, I'm trying to get myself ready for what I know is coming. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I have to read it to see it and go, okay, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I agree.
Here's an interesting question. What's better, 20 majors? No, one major and 5 minors, or double major with 2 minors? I'm passionate about all majors and minors, which is making it tough. Dina, do majors and minors matter?
No. No. What matters is that you have all your prerequisites done, and it obviously matters to you, right? Because you want to spend your time in a way where you're doing something you enjoy. But I've seen students with, some crazy minors, but it's like, how did you even apply that to your activities, or what did you do with it, right? It could be a language, right? And it could be a minor in Arabic, a minor in Spanish, and that could help you, communicate with populations that speak those languages, and that makes a lot of sense. It has to make sense for you.
For you, for the student, not necessarily again trying to sell it to the admissions committee. But where I typically balk at minors and majors and stuff is I almost exclusively see where it hurts the student, where they tried to take on too much and jam their semester full of too many classes to try to meet all of the requirements. They're like, I have a C average. I'm like, they're like, but I double majored in biomechanical engineering and some other crazy theoretical physics. They're like, doesn't that matter? I'm like, no, it doesn't.
No.
So be careful with those.
Yeah. I agree.
I love these. I know there's no rules, but I noticed there's 2 different sections for posters, presentations, and another for publications. I've done my fair share of both. I want to share both. Continued. However, I have other impactful experiences I want to share. Should I try and include all of these in just one section, or leave out one of the 2? So Garrett, I'm confused when you say I have other impactful experiences. Are you talking about the essay, other impactful experiences, or just generically you have other ... impactful experiences that you want to share? So Scott, this is one of the hard things with AMCAS having only 15 spots, is that a lot of times students are making cuts, right? It's like you only got enough spots for half of your experiences. Pick and choose. What do you recommend when it comes to picking and choosing what stays, what goes?
Well, I think you want to, as much as possible, really open yourself up to the admissions committee by having the things that you put as activities be varied and diverse. So, I think that one of the things that you want to try to do, in my view, is try to think about, for each activity, what am I trying to communicate about myself through this activity to the admissions committee. And, that's where I think that if you've got, one of them that really stresses a particular point that you've, done, such as, leadership, or a particular activity, even if it's a hobby that you feel like, demonstrated something, that you want to think about what are each of these doing, and so that if you have one activity that is focusing on one thing, that maybe not have another activity that focuses on the same thing. And I'm not talking about the description about what you did. I'm talking about what you got out of it and what it says about you as a person. To vary those things so that as the admissions committee member looks through your activity list, they're seeing a variety of different things that you're stressing. This is what this did for me, or this is what this did for me, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's easy. One would have to assume there's going to be a research entry for these things that have publications. And so you can easily add like, hey, we also have a published thing in here. So you can still include it. So, Monica, if a secondary essay does not have a character limit, how long should it be? Welcome, Monica, to the Overthinking Premed Club. One of us. It needs to be as long as it needs to be, Monica, to answer the question. It's like Monty Python. The count shall be 3. Sticks son, thoughts on recent stories about UCLA's admissions process / lowered standards. It feels like dishonest reporting to me, but I'm curious what y'all think. I have not read the article that came out. I don't know if you guys saw the headline. The headline was basically someone, and again, I just saw the headline, and what I remember from it, someone is pissed off saying, hey, the students coming out of UCLA are subpar. They're not qualified, and it's all because of DEI stuff. Which is funny because California has outlawed affirmative action since the 90s. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Sticks son, I definitely want to go and do a deep dive into that article and what's being said. I saw the headline, but nothing more.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it.
I mean, it's interesting because the question is who's the judge of this, right? We have a judge in this country of med school graduates' competency. That's called the board exams, right? USMLE for MD schools and the COMLEX for DO schools. We as a society, as a medical board in the grand scheme of things for each state has said, yes, like we consider anyone who passes these exams to be competent enough to get a medical license in this country. Now, obviously, that's not the end all be all. We have stories like Dr. Death, whatever his name is, Michael something, I forget his name. The neurosurgeon who was obviously terrible at being a neurosurgeon, but also sounded like he had substance use disorder and some other stuff going on. So yeah, I mean, bad eggs slip through the cracks all the time, but to discredit a whole admissions process for opinion probably speaks more of that person saying it than anything else. Because if the students are graduating and passing the boards, which they have to do to graduate, at least the first two. Yeah, I don't know. Chanel, in a personal statement, would it be okay to talk about how my son's diagnosis and medical journey over the years has made me want to be a doctor? Or is that not enough? So, Dina, I'll throw this one to you. We often talk about from the book that I wrote, the Premed Playbook Guide to the Medical School Personal Statement, we often talk about the seed and watering events as a way to explain this journey to confirming that a student wants to be a doctor. This sounds very much potentially like a seed.
Like a seed.
Does there need to be more beyond that?
Yes. Yeah, this sounds like a seed. This sounds like it could be an introduction in your personal statement into what planted the seed and planted your interest in medicine and pursuing the journey of becoming a doctor. But then how did you foster that? How did we call them watering events, right? Like, what did you do after that helped confirm this and served as like evidence in a way, right? Did you then start working with other patients that, taught you even more? Did you start working with different populations, that expanded on like your own son's, your experience with your son? So I think it's okay to talk about it. It shouldn't be your only story though. No personal statement should just be about one story.
Agree. I think that's pretty good broad advice that we can use there. Here's an interesting question. We've talked about this a little bit recently. For ACOMA, some schools have, quote, additional questions. Are these the secondaries, or do they send more? Is it best to send to some, then add those after completing the questions? So a little background here for ACOMAS. ACOMAS is hosted, run by a company called Liaison. Liaison has had this technical ability for a while, where schools, as part of the primary application, can include their secondary questions as part of their primary. Now, confuses students because they're like, wait, this is the primary. How can there be secondaries? Just ignore the words and just understand that, yes, Monica, those are secondary questions that you're seeing. From a technical standpoint, schools have historically just pulled the data from ACOMAS or AMCAS or TMDSAS, and then they use another piece of software to host all of the secondary questions and collect payments for secondary questions and all of that stuff. And ACOMAS has built in that ability into the ACOMAS application so that schools don't have to go and use another piece of software, which they typically have to pay for, to host their secondary questions. So yes, what you can do is you can submit ACOMAS to at least one school that doesn't have the secondaries built in, and then slowly work on those secondary questions and add those schools as you work on those questions. So it's been a big point of confusion, and it's been around for a while. There have been a few schools that have used it previously, but there are more schools this year using it. So that's where that is. Sai, as a Canadian applicant, it's extremely difficult to get shadowing and clinical experience here. Would it be looked down upon to go to a country like India to get this experience? Oh, Scott, this comes up all the time in terms of Canadian applicants. There's at least one province, I think, that kind of outlaws shadowing altogether. But it's harder. I haven't heard that clinical experience is harder because you can just go get a job. Shadowing, right? Definitely.
Yeah.
What should our friendly Canadians do? Should they go to India? Should they come here if they can?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you want to go to a U.S. medical school, don't go to India to shadow. Come to the U.S. and shadow. If you know, now there may be logistical issues with that for you. Maybe you've got family in India. So you know, there may be other things that I'm unaware of, but you know, I don't think that if you're going to an American medical school that necessarily shadowing a physician in India is gonna. I mean, it'll be a part of the application. It won't necessarily be a red flag, but it's not going to be the same impact as it would be if it was a North American shadowing experience, but in particular in the U.S. So, yeah, I mean, I would say try to do it in the U.S. if at all possible.
Yeah. Agree. Good luck. West Virginia use. What's a use? Hey everyone, thoughts on listing a hobby as most meaningful? I rescued a dog in September, have been training, hiking with her every day. It's been very emotionally valuable to me. Any issues with a hobby as a most meaningful, Dina? Or is it all about presentation?
I don't have an issue with it as long as the other two most meaningfuls are, you know, something a little more concrete, like a clinical experience or a volunteer experience or research or something. I also think it's all in the way that you write this up. Like, do you have enough to talk about for the 700 character experience description and the 1325 most meaningful, and being reflective on it. I think if you can talk about it in a way, you said that you're training and hiking. Yeah. Oh, my other most meaningful, working as a CNA. Okay. Yeah. So then I think it's okay. Yeah. If you put 3 hobbies, is your 3 most meaningful? I'd be a little bit concerned.
Right.
Dog rescue,
know.
cat rescue, kangaroo rescue. I
Yeah.
am a fan of diversity.
Yeah, it sounds like this changed you, in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, and I'm a huge dog lover, so I'm gonna
That's
say it's okay.
What kind of dog? That's what I want to know.
Yeah,
What
right.
kind of dog?
Angela has a question. What is the best way to
I'll take this
understand
one.
what patient population
this
a school
question.
serves? Yeah, Dina.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite tips I give every student is, look up the Community Health Needs Assessment, CHNA, Community Health Needs Assessment. You can find it for any city or town in the United States. It's run by Department of Health, the government, every few years. They're posted on every single hospital website, and it is pure gold in terms of learning about a population for that community in terms of the health needs. So a CHNA will highlight for you the usually top 5 to 10 health needs priorities for that city or town. Also giving
I did not know this.
I use it in almost all of my feedback for secondaries and in my mock interviews.
Nice.
They're pure gold. Because
Tina's holding out on us.
Sorry, if you have someone who, say, is interviewing, is from Boston and interviewing somewhere in like Michigan and has no idea what the community is like, they've never been there, to learn a lot about the community, read the Community Health Needs Assessment. It breaks the community down by everything, like demographics, like mortality rates, income, everything. It's amazing. And I think it gives students a little more confidence going into an interview, number one, from an area that they're not from, and number two, they're great for writing secondaries. I know so many students that use them, and just, let's say the top priority for a community is addressing mental health, and all of your volunteer work and research is in mental health. You can easily write about that and say, hey, like, this is what I can bring to impact the community. Yeah, so if you click on the 2021 report, they're usually run every 2 to 3 years. Yeah, and so helpful. Now I just gave away my biggest secret.
Multidisciplinary. I love how there's multiple hospitals participating.
That's pretty cool.
Is awesome.
Yeah. And usually like a quarter of the way down will be the top priorities. So this is the best way, I think.
Love it. Pure gold. Like Scott and I learned something new
so
today.
Helpful.
Right?
Yeah. Especially in mock interviews when like I give questions and students are like, I don't know anything about this area. I'm like, you need to, go into an interview for a city or town that you're not from and know nothing about, knowing something because this is the population you'll be serving.
I mean, even silly things like there's a goal here: increase access to transportation for low-income residents. Like, it's a very generic goal, but it talks specifically about the walking paths in the area, like, and so it gets super nuanced from a more general goal. That's really cool. Love it.
I've learned a lot reading them, especially about like, I don't know, the number one cause of death in an area.
That's fascinating.
So it'd be interesting to try to gather those and then run them through a tool like ChatGPT to try to pull out whatever specific highlights we want from each, and we can add that stuff to Mapped.
That'd be great.
Well, that's the stuff like ChatGPT is perfect for, because it can read all of that data and pull out what we want. Love it. All right. Angela says, that was so helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Why does TMDSAS ask about schools applied to out of state? How is this evaluated by Adcoms? Scott, I love this question because I'm surprised TMDSAS still does this, knowing that AMCAS stopped giving some of this information for legal reasons.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah. Why does TMDSAS do this? And why do they think Texas is special?
I think that, I mean, let's be clear. that the reason AMCAS did it is because their lawyers got nervous.
Yep. AKA legal reasons.
Yeah, but I had the dean of the medical school years ago at UT Southwestern told me that lawyers are always the goal of a lawyer is to get you or keep you out of trouble.
Yeah.
And
they're always thinking worst case scenario.
We're always thinking worst case scenario, and so and sometimes you do things because it's the right thing to do, not because it's legally unacceptable or legally acceptable or whatever. Anyway, so the way that I think admissions committees sometimes use this information, I don't think it's widely used, but I do think it gives them a little bit of an insight into the scope of your application. So we have a Texas resident who's only applying to Texas schools. So that shows that kind of what their focus is and where they want to go. To medical school, they want to go in Texas, as opposed to a Texas resident, let's say, that is applying all over the place into some very great schools and all that stuff. Then it just gives a little bit of insight into what the potential yield is for that student. I don't think that medical schools use it to say, well, they're applying all over the place, so we're not going to deal with them. We're just going to, not do anything with them. I've never heard of that, but when it gets to the level of the admissions process at a particular school, who we're going to make offers to, or even more notable, when they're looking at a waiting list, and they see, well, this student is on 3, waiting lists. We know they're applying, all over the place. They have really high numbers, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so if we're looking for somebody to fill the class from a waiting list, then that it might in that regard affect, kind of how they might move forward on that. So it's very, it's not used in any kind of systematic way, but I think it's just kind of information that can be a little bit helpful in certain parts of the process, potentially.
Yeah. So I just pulled up, let me share my screen. I don't think TMDSAS will be mad at me for sharing this. It's just the application and kind of the language here.
Yeah.
And so have you applied, or do you intend to apply to any non-TMDSAS medical schools for entry year 2025? I don't see any language here that would tell me this is a legal requirement to report this. Can students just say no if they don't want to report this, Scott?
I guess they could say no. That would be lying if they're really applying.
What if they change their mind and then apply to schools 2 days later?
Yeah, that's still a little murky, ethically speaking, I would say.
Yeah, my general stance on this is I don't want to give more information that may be detrimental to my application if I don't have to. And so my advice, unfortunately, would be just say no to this question.
And you can do that if your ethical, fabric allows for that, then go for it.
We call those little white lies, Scott.
But that would be like AMCAS asking if you're applying ACOMAS or TMDSAS. Like one has, I don't know. I feel like it's private information. It's
well, the whole thing is private information. The entire application is private information. I mean, they're asking lots of very deep questions about very deep and personal things. Why is this any different?
Because this is not a judgment of my ability to be a medical student.
I know.
I'm
not defending it.
No, I know.
I'm not defending it. I'm just saying I don't know why. I don't know how the individual admissions committees look at it. My sense is that it's not looked at any big level. So, I would say do whatever you want to do with that.
Let me pose a question. Let's say you're applying for a job, and on the job application it says, have you applied to any other jobs recently? how would you answer that? It's the same thing.
I would say no.
I would say no.
I want them to know that I'm committed to you. Right?
Well, I guess.
Are you dating anyone else? No.
And then my response to that would be, so you're applying to one job? You've applied to one job.
This is
You
the job
expect
that I
to
know
get
is
the
right
job.
for me.
Oh,
This is-
okay. So I don't know. Go on. Move on.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting,
Move
right?
on.
In light of
It is
TMD or
interesting.
AMCAS changing the way that they share information with their member schools through the application process, the schools don't see what other schools you apply to anymore. And in fact,
that's right.
I had a student the other day going, I don't want to apply to 50 schools because the schools will see how many schools I applied to, and they'll think that I'm not confident in my application. I'm like, who says they see the number of schools? So I messaged a friend. I phoned a friend who's a dean of admissions. She's like, we don't see that information.
No.
So there's so many myths out there. And again, they're not necessarily myths because just a few years ago, the med school saw the other schools that you applied to, the other schools that you got into. And the problem with that information is if a school is making decisions based on assumptions that you're going to go to a different school or based on the fact that you got into a school, they're no longer judging you based on a candidate. And I think that's where there's some legal murkiness where AMCAS lawyers said that we need to stop doing this.
Agreed. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. So anyway, I think there is a little bit of a difference, TMD SAS versus the other application services to go. There's a separation of teams here a little bit where we can be less in cahoots to call the other school and be like, hey, like if I offer this person, you're going to offer this person.
I think that the point you're making, Ryan, is very interesting, and I think it's very appropriate because I think it really does require one to understand the camaraderie amongst the medical schools in Texas and how different that is than the other states. There's some states where the medical schools in that state don't even talk to each other. They don't like each other.
They're competing
competing against each other. And then Texas is really a whole different ball game when it comes to that. It's, there's a lot of collegiality. There's a lot of, I'm going to pick up the phone and call this other admissions officer and say, hey, I've got a question, let's talk about this, about particular issue or candidate or whatever. So, I mean, there's just a lot more collegiality. I do think that affects it quite a bit.
Yeah, I'll never forget. And I told the story the other day randomly, where you and I first met, Scott, in Toronto. I gave a talk about medical schools and admissions offices being more transparent about this process. And there was a dean of admissions who was like, we can't be more transparent. We're competing against this for the same students. And I was like, no, you're not. Stop it. It's just the scarcity mindset that I'm just like, I don't agree with. This is a very common question. It seems like a silly question, but it's a very common question. I'm glad you asked it, Tisha. Can a DO student take the USMLE and get an MD? No. You can take the USMLE, but you still get a DO degree. It's the medical school that's conferring the degree on you, not the exams.
Yeah.
Good question. Comes up a lot.
And a lot of DO students take the USMLE.
Yeah,
because they have to
increase their competitiveness.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's no MD residencies anymore, Scott.
Well, that's true. That's the
but it's done for competitiveness. Yeah. Or assumed competitiveness, unfortunately. As an international applicant, 392 GPA, 506 MCAT, who has a lot of volunteering hours and shadowing experience with a low MCAT score, would the low MCAT score be making it hard for me to get into an MD school? So first off, why just MD? Dina, a 506 is going to make it hard to get into a lot of schools, international or not. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I need more context here, right? Like you're just saying you have volunteering hours and shadowing. Like shadowing isn't, it's passive. It's not clinical. And you're giving stats, but I think I need to see everything. It's a holistic review. But yeah, I mean, why just MD?
Yep.
You know, cast a little bit of a wider net.
Yeah. And I think sometimes with international students, depending on where they're from, I would want to know the sub scores on the MCAT. If the the cars section is weighing that down, or if it's I don't know. I'd be interested to know the sub scores.
Yeah, I asked recently an admissions person, another dean of admissions, why med schools don't use TOEFL. TOEFL seems to be super common in the pre-PA space.
Right.
TOEFL is an English competency exam, basically.
Undergrad space too.
Yeah. And her response was basically like, we use the MCAT for that, right? No, number one, we require the majority of our credits. Most med schools require a majority of credits to be US based credits.
Mm-hmm.
So they're assuming some sort of English competency through those credits. And then using the MCAT, which is a heavily kind of biased English reading comprehension test.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's like, we don't need TOEFL. We got those two things going for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be interesting, those sub scores. Speaking of scores, Drew got my score back 128, 130. Very disappointed with my car score. Will I be judged more leniently being an ESL student? I mean, 124 is not terrible. Most schools will accept that. Let's see. 2, 4, 9, 8. So 508 overall.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad.
However, the thrust of the score of the question being no candidate is judged more leniently just because they're a certain category of a student. You're in a mix of students that are applying, and you're going to be viewed within that mix.
Well, let me ask you, Scott, because being an ESL student is context around potentially why there was some struggle, similar to how we say the other impactful experiences essay may give context to parts of an application. Does that context not matter? I mean, they're not going to go 124 is good enough for an ESL student, but they may go, oh, ESL student 124 got it with that context.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
So I think what you're saying is you're not going to be scored differently because you're someone different.
Correct. That's
right?
Correct. Yes.
But just kind of from a human context perspective, I can understand things a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Got it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Got it. It's actually a 510. Did I do my math wrong? Oh, because I only did 2 points for 128. So 120 is 3. 3 is 6, 5 is 11. Yeah, 510. I did my math wrong. Leave me alone. Good job, Drew. Thanks for calling me out on my math.
Well, they should have put the whole score in the question. Right? I'm terrible at math. So like to me that I was like, I gotta figure it out.
It's relatively easy. You just go, how many more than 125 or how many less than 125? I just counted 128 as only 2 more than 125 instead of 3. Anyway, I'm usually pretty good at math. That's shame on me. Balraj, how to go about taking the prereqs if my undergraduate was in computer science and high school subjects were PCM, no biology. Is there a quick way around? Not sure your question. You just take the prereqs.
Sounds like maybe international. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. High school subjects were PCM.
You just
no
take
idea.
the classes that everybody has to take.
You take the classes. That's all.
Okay.
William, I'm leaning more towards DO because of the competitiveness of MD schools in California. I'm sorry, William, but if you look at the competitiveness of DO schools, the acceptance rate is worse the last few years I've looked in terms of DO acceptance rates. Does being a DO make it difficult to get into competitive specialty, general surgery, neuro? Like neurosurgery, yes, there's very few DOs that go into that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's because they're DO, but all that data is easy to go find, William. Just look at NRMP match data. Go check that out. Awesome. Monica says, ACOMAS asks if you're applying to AMCAS or any other systems, but do they ask if you're applying to any other school? Like what schools? So it's interesting they do ask that. Shame on them. Answer no. I'll keep my ethics in the toilets.
I absolve you.
Thank you, Rip. Say a couple Hail Marys.
Forgive us for our sins. We can have a new podcast, Confessions.
Yeah.
Dr. Scott Wright.
Well, we have Premed Diary we can bring back. I loved that show because it was an anonymous phone line that students could call into. Dean, I don't know if you know of this podcast. It's phenomenal.
No.
Students can just call in anonymously and just like pour their heart out and
Man.
be like, I'm really struggling. This sucks, blah, blah, blah. And then my wife was doing it, the other Dr. Gray. She would listen to it and then it was almost like a Dear Ann or whatever that column in the newspaper was. Dear Abby. Yeah.
Dear Abby.
Just like, hey, I need some help. And it's really cool, but I just ran out of time to do it. My wife got super busy with her practice, and it's something we've talked about bringing back.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
All right, where was that one I just had? Vanessa, for TMDSAS for future activities, what if I don't know what I'm going to be doing? Does it look bad if I leave it blank? Scott, unfortunately, the medical school application, whether AMCAS, ACOMAS, TMDSAS, it's a snapshot in history that is most of what the med schools are judging you on. And if it appears from that snapshot that you're like, okay, done. All right, I did what I need to do. Now I'm going to put my feet up. Potentially is not a good sign.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it shows a little forethought. It shows a little planning on your part, particularly if you're taking a gap year and you don't know what you're going to do during that gap year. Then the question becomes, why are you taking a gap year then? If you don't know what you're doing, it just raises questions about judgment and things like that. Does that mean you won't get into medical school? No, not necessarily, but it probably didn't look good.
Yeah. What if they know that they want to be a scribe, they just don't have a job kind of laid out yet?
And you can put that in there. You can put, especially in TMDSAS, you can put, my plan is I'm going to be seeking a scribe job, whatever, and just say that, these are my goals for my gap year.
Yep. And if you have shaky morals or ethics like I do, then put like, I'm going to be curing cancer. Like that's a good.
Or in prison. I don't know,
One or the other. I'll be like, what's her name? Elizabeth, who's the Theranos person?
Holmes, Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah.
I'm going to invent a machine that I can diagnose 4,000 things with one drop of blood. Sorry, Elizabeth. Drew, one more question. What does 10th percentile MCAT mean for a school? Does it mean the lowest score accepted in that year? Is it reasonable to apply to a school with a 514 10th percentile score with this person having the 510? So 10th percentile by definition, Drew, means 10% of the class is at or below that score. Now, unfortunately, all 10% of them could be at that score. All 10% of them could be at that score and 1 point below. And so it's really hard to know specifically. And this is where I would much rather see the box and whisker graphs for this data to know, like, here is the 25th to 75th percentile box, whatever that percentile range is. And then here's min and max numbers. And the argument was made, I think, by the same person who said, "Oh, we can't be transparent because we're competing for the same students." The argument was made that if we give out lowest MCAT scores, students will know who that person is. And to me, it just raised really big alarm bells to go, it seems like a little bit of a off-color comment. So yeah, I don't know. So that's the definition. Drew. MSAR also includes now, as of last year, mean with 1 standard deviation. So that gives a little bit of transparency. Yeah. So go check that out as well. Little bit of a clearer picture with that data. Infinity and beyond. If I am only applying to one school, is it a negative for the school to know this information?
I mean, I would think this is like early decision if you're only applying to one school, right?
Yeah. So it may be a school that they don't have early decision. So let's assume that they're just applying regular decision, but just to one school.
Why?
Is it a negative for the school to know that? I don't know.
How would you let the school know that?
Right. And why would you let the school know that?
In the
like, are you thinking like, oh, if they know it's only one school, they're gonna really feel bad and be like, oh, this is their only shot? No, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. More context, Infinity. I don't know why it would be a negative, but I don't know how you would communicate that information either, other than just throwing it in randomly on a primary or in secondary applications. Just like BTW, you're my one and only. Yeah. And there are reasons why students only apply to one school for family reasons. I had a student. Well, let's give Scott his moment.
Only you. Go ahead.
Is Welky okay? Sounds sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another Infinity.
Yeah, I have seen some secondary interview questions that ask me about the schools I'm applying to. Yeah,
I haven't seen those.
Yeah. I every once in a while will see students talk about, oh, they asked me what other schools I'm applying to. Nanya.
Nanya University.
Yeah. Maya, I have a class that I took during the summer with my college scholars program that was both writing and math. We wrote essays and learned statistics. I don't know how to categorize this on the AMCAS app. Pick one and let AMCAS decide what they want to do.
How is it categorized on your transcript?
Yeah.
Right.
Potentially. Yes. Yeah. I always give the example. There was a bio, it was like Bio 301, which was writing for biology majors. I'm like, that's not a biology class. That's a writing class. And so this is where just some critical thinking comes into play. Was it truly 50-50 writing and statistics? Was it 75-25? Like, go with whatever was more.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Awesome, friends. We will stop there. Again, if you would love the lovely advice one-on-one with some of our amazing advisors, like Reverend Dr. James Scott Wright and Dina Golini from Stanford and Brown, not just Brown. Then go over to medicalschoolhq.net. Use that code PMOH to save on essay editing, interview prep, all that good stuff. So, Dina, Scott, thank you so much for hanging out today. We are here almost every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.
Me too.
Bye-bye.